topic for sure. Anita, over to you.
Hi, guys.
Do we have everyone?
We've got Patrick and Lucas, and we're just waiting. And there's Caryma. Perfect. Good evening, guys. Thanks for bearing with us. It's been a long but informative day. Hope you guys are all doing well on the East Coast.
Thanks for having us.
We're just waiting on Lucas. So I can start. So good evening, everybody. Thank you all for sticking around and joining us today at CanMar's Career Days. It's been a fabulous day showcasing the talent that we have within the cannabis industry and the various technical industries that encompass this space altogether. The sector is ever growing and ever evolving, so it's really neat to see the different opportunities that exist within this industry itself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Anita. I am CanMar's liaison. I'm also a pharmacist. So I have a different perspective with respect to cannabis and how we can utilize it from a medical perspective, but also how we can marry the different industries together to a big family and how we can move forward with plant-based medicines. And so tonight, joining us, we have 3 veterans within the cannabis space, you know, pioneers that took a chance with cannabis. They believe in cannabis and they've been pillars in our community, others to join it. We have Patrick Moher. He is the CEO and co-founder or CEO of Ethical Images, and he's the business development director and partner at Microdose. We have Dr. Lucas McCann. He is the chief scientific officer and government regulatory expert at CanDelta. And we have the fabulous Caryma, am I saying it right? Sa? Yeah.
Caryma Sa,
she
that's right.
is a local director at Normal Canada. So Patrick, maybe we'll start with you and you can dive into a little bit more about yourself and your background and your passion for cannabis.
Sure, yeah. So my passion for cannabis is that I like to smoke it. I always have. And my professional experience in the cannabis industry started almost, I think 5 years ago. I started investing in cannabis. I was a professional photographer, and I got more and more into the industry, and through doing that I was able to leave my job there and found a startup, which was Ethical Image. So it's a creative agency that me and my business partner Connor run, and we've founded a couple other businesses since then, including Goodwood, which is an accessories line. We're partners at AdCan, which is a marketing firm. We actually, with Mr. Lucas and Sherry over at CanDelta, started the UCAN Academy. And then we made a move into psychedelics about 6 months ago, starting Alan Aldis with 5 total, including myself, business partners from the cannabis industry. And we're really focused on transparent, honest communications and you know, bringing these important medicines forward in a responsible manner. And then at Microdose, we're using that as a B2B intelligence agency for data, events, and general media for the psychedelic industry.
Perfect. Thank you for that great introduction. Lucas, I'll turn to you and you can let us know a little bit more about yourself as well, please.
Sure. My name is Lucas McCann. I'm a regulatory consultant at CanDelta. My passions are music and the pursuit of knowledge and happiness, of course. My formal training's in chemistry. So I did about 13 years of university, which is a pretty long time. Studied natural product synthesis. So effectively, whatever we could remove and extract from a plant, we would attempt to synthesize in a lab. And I thought that was a very cool way of sort of getting into, at the time, what I didn't really know what I was looking to do, but with the legalization coming online for recreational in Canada, it's been very, I guess, sort of synchronous. After my my PhD was completed, I moved over to Health Canada. I worked in the inspectorate there, set up the chemistry lab that they had there to quite an extent, and I stepped aside and decided to move into the consulting space because there was a need, and there were a lot of folks asking me questions, and I thought this was a great way to use that knowledge that I had acquired through university, many years of it, and apply that in a more formal setting.
Perfect. Thank you. You've got quite the industry expertise, and we appreciate you being on board.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Caryma, if you can enlighten us with all the fabulous work that you've been doing and all the activism that you're involved in.
Thank you very much for having me. So I am a lawyer by training, and I practice primarily in the areas of housing, criminal, and cannabis law. And I guess my introduction to the cannabis space, initially in university as a consumer, and then in law school, I found it a very interesting subject, and the notion of crime and harm and what is criminalized and what isn't has always struck me. And the history of cannabis in particular, I found really troubling and problematic. I was fortunate to graduate and start my career really right around the time of legalization. So I was able to hit the ground running in that sense. And for me, cannabis has been a great field, getting to know all the amazing people. It's a very powerful community. And because it's a relatively new area of law, it was also an opportunity to kind of focus on something and really develop a niche. So I spent the past 4 or 5 years attending as many panels and workshops as possible, just learning as much as I can. And that sort of culminated this year in March. I was appointed the executive director at Normal Canada. So I'll just say a few words about Normal. It is a nonprofit organization chartered at the federal level in Canada since 1978. The organization itself originates in the United States, and its purpose and mandate has always been the elimination of civil and criminal penalties for cannabis consumption, cultivation, sort of the non-violent consumption of the plant. And now that we have achieved legalization in Canada, our mandate has shifted a little bit to focus on ensuring that there is a fair and equitable market, and that people who were previously legacy participants are able to transition into a legal market. We'll talk more about that, I think, during the panel. But again, thank you very much for having me.
Great, thank you guys. I do appreciate you guys spending your evening with us. And you mentioned about like reduction and harms reduction. I think through plant-based medicines and the upcoming movement with the psychedelics, we'll see more of a pivot towards holistic medicine and how we can all be a part of this bandwagon, and where we can be all inclusive, include everybody in this conversation as a mechanism to heal and move forward as a community. So I have a couple of questions, and we'll start with asking Patrick our first question. Patrick, as a passionate and unapologetic environmentalist, you've done quite a bit of work. Through your work as an ethical promoter, how do you select who you partner with, and how do you customize each customer that you work with so that it echoes and radiates what the value of what each company that you're working with, that their values are being resonated throughout the space that we're in?
Yeah, so I would say in terms of like what kind of client we take on, it's really in the line of work that we do with creative, and not only that, but like getting that story out there and having an impact on the industry. We really try and work with people that align with our values. So when you're aligned with values, it's really easy to kind of curtails into the second part of your question, which is about how you make each different story or advertisement or whatever unique. It's really figuring out what other people want and what kind of an impact that they want to have on the world through their business. And we really prioritize clients that are doing active work, corporate social responsibility or inclusive hiring policies, things like that, to make sure that we're actually moving the industry forward. And through our work, we do some fundraisers and nonprofit work and stuff like that at discounted rates. So it's really about aligning yourself with the businesses that you want to be seen with and that you want to help take the industry forward, in my opinion.
Right. So, given with marketing, it's kind of difficult to actually showcase what we want from our company, given all the framework and legislations that are put in place that kind of barrier us from moving forward. Can you speak to how you can pivot around these and how you've been able to showcase the companies you've worked with?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll say to that is, a lot of people feel at a disadvantage in those regards, but really it's a regulated industry, so you're going to have pretty strict rules regardless of which category you're in any regulated industry. I think they can be extreme for sure. Some of them are unnecessary, but also it really eliminates anything but the truth. So, to some companies, that's actually an advantage because their truth is stronger, or more authentic than other people's, and it really resonates in the product. And then, ultimately, marketing really isn't selling things to people, it's building a relationship with the consumer. So if you're consistently delivering a high quality product at a reasonable price point, you're going to see winners emerge. And I think we're starting to actually see that with, the transition right now to Cannabis 2.0. We're seeing some value brands emerge as real winners in the industry because of that.
Right. And you bring out a great point where, we need to focus in who our market is, who our consumers are, and narrow into our niche markets as individual corporations. There's a lot of pie to go around, so everyone can start to focus in on which piece of the pie do you want.
And I think another thing that people often confuse is they build brands around what they think their audience is rather than building a brand for what the audience wants,
Yeah, so kind of honing in on, who's your specific target audience and what are they wanting actually from this market.
Exactly, and then solve their problems, yeah.
And so this kind of leads into our next question that's kind of tailored more towards Lucas here. With CanDelta, you guys are enabling your clients to comply in the regulatory space. Maybe you can comment on the struggles you've seen since the inception of legalized cannabis and how differences in the provincial framework and our federal framework created barriers for companies to move ahead, and what are some ways to mitigate these barriers given that framework that we have?
Yeah, that's a great question. I could probably talk on that for hours, but I think the most important thing to address in that question is to state and to allow folks to understand that I understand that the way that I looked has helped sort of set me up for success in life, and that I understand that my academic counterparts haven't necessarily had the same opportunities because of the way that they've looked. So definitely one continued issue has been the fact that this has been not only just a male-dominated industry, but represented by those that are look a certain way. So we're still looking at breaking through sort of that norm and that sort of stereotype that's permeated this industry. So I think that's a huge challenge that really needs to be addressed. We're very proud to be working in a company here that's run not only by a woman who's a CEO, which is also very important to have women in boardrooms and women that participate on boards. That's huge, but also one that's at an intersectionality in terms of her identity and is a person of color and a visible minority. So I feel very fortunate to be a part of such a vibrant company for those reasons. But to go back to your question here, a lot of the regulatory frameworks that folks have to go into from the federal side are a huge bottleneck, and folks have been struggling. There have been improvements, but the amount of money that people have to put in while they're waiting for their company to get up and running is huge. I mean, it's getting better, but it requires a huge amount of investment. And to add to that point, there are a lot of folks that are getting into this industry that we work with sometimes, and then once they get licensed, they turn around and say, okay, well, now what? What does my business model look like? How do I actually make money? And it does require a certain amount of research to get into. So it's very important there. There's a huge amount of risk to get involved, a huge amount of risk. It takes a lot of people, and the planets completely have to align for folks to be able to take that leap of faith. And still, there's no guarantee. And then having said all that, we're in a situation now where we've got a huge oversupply of cannabis at these licensed producers' facilities. It's filling up their secured storages. We've seen secured storages that are literally overflowing and bursting. And a lot of that's because of the provincial framework is fractured compared to the federal side. So licensed producers are growing and growing and growing. They're not going to stop growing. They're making these new products, and these products are also very bulky. But where do they actually go? We don't have enough retail stores to sell the product in. Alberta's been a bit of a leader. BC's dragging their feet a little bit, and Ontario has just been awful. They keep moving the goalposts every time someone goes and lines up a shot. So that's been a huge challenge in this industry. So managing clients' expectations is a huge skill to have. It's very, very important to do, but also knowing about the industry before you take the plunge is going to be very important for yourself if you're considering it.
Right. It's almost like 2 steps forward and 4 steps backwards. I think, when we had the inception of legalization in the recreational space, there should have been unification between the provinces and how we rolled out with this instead of each province having its own mandates. It's created barriers all across.
That's a great point, and it's also very disjointed. So a lot of the hard work that we're doing at the federal side, a lot of that information, data collection, record keeping, it just gets completely lost on the provincial side. And not only that, but where does the product actually go? Give us retail stores. What's the big issue?
Yeah, there's consumers. People want to use this. We need more medication. We need more education so people can pivot towards this plant-based industry.
My biggest complaint is when we see legislation come into place that allows for example, delivery of alcohol, and to make the comparison between cannabis and alcohol is completely fair. So why is one being favored compared to another? It frustrates me to no end, and it's completely unfair. And I think that we all need to get all the premiers at a big table and have a big conversation, maybe give a few of their heads a little shake too, and make sure that we're all on the same page here, because it's a great industry. It's benefiting our economy. It's being taxed. We're pushing the illicit market out, but not only that, I mean, we're creating jobs. And in a time where we're effectively in a huge recession, why wouldn't we enable that?
Exactly. Here we can come together as a community, collaborate, join forces and really pivot in a direction where we create sustainable job growth for everybody involved.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah. So moving a little bit different direction, Caryma, Normal's always been a champion for policy and reform with public outreach. The corporate world is now benefiting from legalization. It's at the end of the day. For an advocacy for cannabis use. So we've got, pioneers in the industry, folks like yourself that paved the way for us to kind of come into this space. Yet there's many marginalized people that are still behind bars. Marginalized people are the pioneers that started with their micro grows and so forth that have kind of been left behind. Can you comment as to what you've been doing to champion others to get involved in the space, or the people that have been left behind and what we're doing to help them now have a voice in this space, inside this space as well?
Sure. So I mean, I'll start by saying that I wouldn't consider myself a pioneer, even though I've been sort of involved in the space for the past 5 years, which, as far as legalization goes, it is quite some time. There are people who have decades and decades of experience and who really suffered harms under prohibition. And those harms, I think the easiest one to sort of think about and conceptualize, of course, are criminal penalties. And, convictions, whether it was for simple possession or growing or trafficking, those have really long-term repercussions. So a record affects your ability to seek employment. It can affect family issues. It can affect your ability to travel. It's a very long list. And when legalization came about and there were these discussions at the federal and provincial levels about how we would unroll, I feel like not enough attention was paid to the really important question in my mind of how do we address the wrongs that have been committed, and how do we ensure that people who have years of experience, expertise, are not only have space in the legal market, but are leaders. And so I think that was perhaps a missed opportunity, but the door is not closed yet. And so that's what, or at least part of what Normal's mandate is looking at. And just to give an example, convictions and the notion that, okay, maybe cannabis never should have been illegal, but we still only see a couple of hundred pardons that have been granted. of the nearly 500,000 Canadians who suffered, criminalization and conviction. And that's to say nothing of people who, may have been roughed up by police and then let go, or other kind of negative interactions in that sense. And picking up a thread from what Lucas was saying, the data that we do have, and we're missing a lot of data because, surprise, surprise, police don't like collecting it. But the data shows that disproportionately, people who are Black and Indigenous suffered the policing and sort of over-policing, and cannabis was really used as kind of a gateway to the criminal justice system. And that's something that we absolutely need to reckon with today, if we are to have any credibility as an industry. I think, as far as sort of what's on the normal agenda, this year the federal government will be reviewing the Cannabis Act. So we are really looking forward to making some concrete proposals of changes or tweaks that can be made. And some are perhaps, more bite-sized than others. So we're going to be ambitious, but at the same time, kind of shore up with some suggestions that I think are very realistic and reasonable, and I'm hopeful that we will gain some traction. Just over the past few months, throughout COVID, we've seen sort of a roller coaster of policy changes at the provincial level, certainly in Ontario, and I think that's fair to say countrywide as well. So that's another area that we are focusing on, and bringing it back to what you were asking, how do we give a voice? Well, everyone has their voice, and we need to think about kind of making space and passing that microphone, so to speak, and that happens by reducing the barriers to entry, and that's not just a criminal conviction, because that can be overcome if you have sort of the right application and you get the proper ministerial approval. But there are other more practical and very tangible barriers, particularly capital, and the amount of money it takes to break into the industry, and again, the notion of shifting goalposts and the risk that's involved. Some of us are more equipped to handle that risk, and particularly where you have either generational wealth or money that is available, or someone who's been set back by their participation in the industry, penalized for it, and now sort of seeing who is actually making all of the money. Those are the social issues that I think need to be addressed.
Right. And I think also there's still a huge stigma associated with cannabis consumption that we need to demystify. Coming from a healthcare sector, I see cannabis as a method of harms reduction, where we use it with the psychedelics and plant-based medicines, microdoses, to start healing. And having these conversations is very important, so that people know that it's not wrong. It's right, actually. It's a plant, it's natural, and we can turn to it in the times of need to heal.
Very much so. And there's this dissonance at the sort of among our political leaders, where we're comfortable somehow spending thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on enforcing sort of cannabis prohibition 2.0, and this arbitrary distinction between licit and illicit cannabis, when in fact the focus should be, is this safe? Is it organic? Is it quality? Not kind of where did you get your seed and how was it grown? So, there's definitely work to do on that front. And, if we're talking kind of public safety, which is identified as kind of a key issue in the Cannabis Act, really we need to be pushing our leaders and holding them accountable for the opioid crisis. And, where are the resources being directed to that? And how interesting that cannabis is actually a form of harm reduction in that space. And so we have these interconnections. And right now there's obviously a lot of discussion about policing and defunding police, and the war on drugs has been, a millions and millions and millions of dollars injected. And the fact that post-legalization, police budgets were increased so that they could better enforce legalization. Like, there's just so much that doesn't make sense. And I think, asking our leaders these questions, that's part and parcel of our responsibility, because it's not enough to sort of be in the industry and sit comfortably and make money, kind of knowing that there is a very problematic legacy. And, that kind of, just to, I guess, my talking point, the police chiefs and politicians who are kind of in leadership roles and sitting at the corporate tables, like, there needs to be some form of atonement and reparation and apology.
Yeah, well said. I don't think any of us could have said it any better. And thank you for those words. And I think we all agree with you that we need to be champions of change, and our government needs to hear us now, right? There's no time like the present, and now's the time to make moves. We have a couple of questions from our attendees. We're going to throw this out as a roundtable discussion. The question asks, what is the first issue or the number one issue facing the Canadian cannabis industry, and what can each of you do to address them? Maybe we want to start with Patrick, and we can just go around the table. You're on mute.
We got a lot of issues. I can't tell anyone what the number one issue is in the cannabis industry, because I think that a lot of what we feel needs to be improved comes from our personal experience and our learned experience. One thing, and I don't want to take a stab at throwing any one thing in as the number one issue, but one thing that I personally want to work on is, so one thing we do through Ethical Image is we donate trees and plant them for every job that we do. And when I see the packaging waste, like I went today and I actually bought like 30 grams of legal cannabis for the first time today. The sticker price was a little bit outrageous, but what I thought was more outrageous was the packaging. They're like, some of them had plastic wrap, cardboard, and an outer shell to make it, childproof. And to me, that's, three, really, so that's one thing that I want to kind of work on that's a passion project of mine, is making that more sustainable, because I really think the eco footprint of cannabis can be far lower if we tried a little bit harder. So that's one thing that's important to me. I don't know what the number one issue is right now, but I'm happy to help anywhere.
There's many issues as we can see. Lucas, do you have anything that you'd like to add in, or Caryma?
I think just sort of thinking about how we got to legalization and the fact that it was really patients who sort of carried us here on their backs. Once we hit October 17th, 2018, I think that perhaps not enough attention has been paid to the situation for medical patients. So tax, I think, is a big issue, and that's sort of one bite-sized piece that can be addressed. I don't know what the biggest issue is, to echo what Patrick was saying, but it is something that comes to mind, and we owe it to, again, the patients and activists who put themselves on the line.
Definitely. Lucas, do you have any more to add to this?
Sure. Again, I'll put another side to the coins that have been tossed around about that question. I think that if you're concerned or involved in cannabis or the industry in any way, then you need to get involved and you need to think about what's important to you, align yourself with that goal. And I think a lot of that involves being vocal. And I think that means being vocal with your MPP. And if you have a sentiment about cannabis stores being in your neighborhood, that you should express that and why it's important to you, because they forget that. And I think the people that are very anti-cannabis stores or anti-cannabis period are very loud, and they're very few. They're the outliers, but they're the ones that folks are listening to. So get involved, write your MPP, call them, tell them you want this, and this is something that's important for the community. It's displacing, a lot of the problems that we've had, for decades now with the illicit market, and it's legitimizing this whole process. So write, call, get involved, and talk to your political representative about why this is important to you. That's number one, what people can do like today to help fix this. I do that. There's a big Twitter storm going on right now with Mike Cole from the Eglinton Lawrence district. I ran in the 2015 election against Mike Cole, and he was very much a stickler for old ways. He listens to the old folks and he likes the old sort of school policy, and he's not bringing that community into the now. And politicians need to do that. That's their job. That's their responsibility. And that's why we pay them. The money comes out of our pockets and goes into theirs because they're supposed to represent us. So make sure that you are being represented.
Most definitely. One thing we can all do is enable ourselves by using our voice and collectively coming together to, showcase that we want to be part of this industry, but we want all inclusiveness, and that starts at the government level and trickles down.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm not trying to cast any shadow on what Patrick or Caryma have said. Those are all great points too, and they all need to be considered. I do think packaging will improve eventually. We'll get there. It's still a stigma that's like rolling a stone uphill, but we will definitely see some improvements on that side. And then yes, we don't want to see people being punished for things that we're benefiting from. Still to this day, there are people in jail for cannabis. WTF, and then
Yeah.
there are boardrooms of sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say one thing I would add in maybe is, we worked together on the legal tender campaign, and that was a cause where the industry really unified, put their voices together and said, no, this is wrong, right? And there was a tangible impact. We had a really direct result. And, with what's happening right now in Ontario retail, I know I've spoken to you, Lucas, about this. We're going to be starting another campaign where it's really just like raising voices of people in the industry. We're going to call it Legal Sender because it rhymes and it's a sequel. But really, trying to bring your voice to the stage and affect change. And the only way you can do that is by having these conversations with politicians, like Lucas is saying.
And there are a lot of other political groups.
Sorry, go on, Lucas.
I was going to say there's a lot of other political groups with a very similar goal in mind, and they've become very prominent in social media lately. I won't name any particular ones, but I'm sure if you've been on Instagram in the last little while, you can see that these are causes that all are striving for a common thing. And it's about aligning ourselves as an industry with those common political goals and making sure that those goals get achieved and we all fight for the same thing.
Yeah, because when you're fighting each other, you don't really make any progress. Somebody has to lose.
Right. And I think here's an opportunity for the cannabis industry to kind of hold hands together and collaborate to showcase what we're capable of instead of picking fights against each other. We need to unify as one whole organization, in essence, and come together and speak up for those that have been left and forgotten.
Yeah, I think that there is understandably some tension between, I'll call them legacy participants for the purposes of this conversation, but sort of various terms that we could use, and kind of the legal industry, quote unquote. And, that is somewhat justified to some extent when you look at some of the shadiness that has transpired. But at the same time, it's not productive for anyone to have the legal market fail. So really the focus needs to be on that transition and ensuring that barriers are reduced or eliminated where appropriate, so that everyone has kind of a fair shake. there's enough sun to shine on everyone, and the infighting. I think that there has to be a distinction drawn between kind of companies that really are in it for the dollar and that's it. And we kind of see and know who they are. It becomes more and more apparent as time passes. And those who do have values that align with the legacy market, may themselves have been participants there and have successfully transitioned. So I think that that's kind of a tension that exists and can be resolved. Not everyone, will be welcome to stay.
Yeah, no, and I think you summarized that quite well. And, we've seen some loud and vibrant companies come, and now they're starting to topple. And here's where, when you actually had a sustainable job description in place and you knew what your company's outcomes were looking for, that you'll be able to withstand these turbulent times. But, unfortunately, it's that time of the night where we're going to start to wrap things up. We've got a couple of questions that we weren't able to answer. So all the attendees out there, we will leave email addresses for you to contact our panelists if you have any more questions or dialogue that you wish to proceed with. Again, on behalf of CanMar, we want to thank you all for attending and for this fabulous dialogue. We could have probably gone on for hours about this topic, as there's just so much to speak of. And, it's important that we come together collectively and we speak our opinions and we collaborate and we figure out solutions to make this community grow and this community become sustainable. I'm going to
Lucas Sa 2021. I'm seeing it a couple of times, so give the people what they want.
I would vote for both of you guys.
The joint campaign. We're interviewing as a team here.
Lots of joints.
Thank you so much, CanMar, for putting this whole day together. You guys really did an exceptional job.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was listening to everything, and honestly, I could listen to it for next, I don't know how many hours, but I would definitely need to find a bed here after that. But you know what, guys, I thoroughly enjoyed your talk today. It was amazing. Thank you for taking up the time to do this.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much again for coming in today. Really appreciate it.
Amazing.
That was great, guys.
Thank you, Caryma.
Thanks for the dialogue.
Excellent. Thank you, Anita, also for being here today and leading this this panel as well. Really appreciate that. Yeah.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.